Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for spending this Sunday evening with us. Our topic of conversation tonight is taxes. Everything you need to know. We're going to get to as much as we can in a half hour, so buckle in for this one. Going to be an interesting conversation with our panel of experts. As always, the way to really take our show to the next level is for you to become involved in it. To do that, there are ways you can call, text, and email. That information displayed on your screen throughout the program tonight. Also, a neat opportunity about this show is there are attorneys standing by right now to speak with you. So whenever you call, opportunity to maybe get a legal question that you've always wanted to know answered or something that's pressing, you can get that taken care of, and I speak with an actual attorney whenever you pick up the phone and call tonight. And those questions, you don't have to worry. We don't air those live. So whenever you call in and ask a question, it's not going to be
absolutely
broadcast to the four corners of the earth. This is Josh Wright of the firm Hollis Wright leading the conversation tonight. Death and taxes.
The good news is I'm not the expert on taxes. We got Sam McCord over here who's the expert on taxes.
He can handle
First of all, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
Absolutely.
David.
Absolutely. You know, we're going to be talking about an interesting topic. I actually don't think of the 250 some shows we've done, don't think we've actually ever done this show, this specific show. And it's not just about how the IRS works. It's if you have debt resolution issues, if you need installment agreements reached with the IRS or with the state entities, tax entities, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions on how you can do that. Okay. It's never too late to make it right.
Right.
And Sam McCord is going to help us through that process tonight. Sam's local, works with his dad here in town, does this type of work, understands this law, and his dad's been around doing it for a very long time, so we're honored to have you on to be able to talk about the issue.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. First of all, how did you get into this area of the law? Because this is a specialty for sure.
It is definitely a specialty, and it's just something that I really just fell into. My dad's been doing it for about 40 years now. I went to law school and decided to get out and follow his footsteps.
So explain in a typical day, what kind of clients are coming in? Are they folks that have not filed their taxes and need to get taxes filed? Are they people that have arrearages with the IRS or the state and need to reach installment agreements? I mean, there's a little bit of all those folks.
We have a little bit of everything. We have everything from people that haven't filed their taxes to people that have already been assessed their taxes and owe money and they can't afford to pay it. So from everything from not have filed taxes to installment agreements and offering compromises to help those people be able to pay what they owe.
So I would suspect that a lot of times you're dealing with people that may not have filed their taxes, have had this on their conscience, know that it's got negative implications moving forward, but want to try and make it right.
Correct.
Okay.
And when you speak about that, the most important thing I can tell you is if you get a letter from the IRS or the State Department of Revenue, the most important thing is to not ignore it. By far, the most important thing you can do is to not ignore it. Call the agent that's listed on the letter, or get in touch with a lawyer, or your accountant. Just don't let that sit around.
And I know that there will be people that are on the couch tonight, in bed, watching TV, recognizing that they've got an issue they want to deal with, and they're realizing now that they've got an opportunity to call and get some free legal advice, which is good. How do you normally structure your agreements with the clients? Do they have to compensate you to do the work that you do? Is there a way that you're compensated through the IRS on the back end? How does that work?
Well, we're compensated by the client most of the time on the front end.
Okay.
We charge, upfront fees that are set for an installment agreement or an offering compromise or just to, send money into the IRS.
Free initial consultations to talk with folks and
Absolutely.
Get an opportunity to understand what their options are?
Absolutely.
Well, and this is something obviously that faces a lot of people that have had issues. I once heard that the top two causes of bankruptcy in our country are medical bills and taxes. And so, those are just two things you're going to have to take care of, and it's for people kind of sticking their head in the sand when things do not go well and they get the IRS letter like Sam was talking about.
Right.
And then unfortunately circumstances where some people just cannot afford to pay medical bills and they didn't have appropriate medical care and have a catastrophic event. So, I would highly encourage people that are watching tonight that have this issue to call, text, or email to have an opportunity to ask some questions of Sam and kind of figure out what they can do to solve their way.
And this is also one of those topics that from a consumer, I am not an attorney, and taxes, it's just confusing. So much of it is hard to keep up with, and you don't know what to do. I also bet it is overwhelming whenever you get behind and you get in trouble. So my question to you, you or your father, how often have you had a client approach you guys and truly their situation, it is hopeless, versus there's almost always a course of action and a way out, because I think folks sometimes think, I've messed up too bad, it's been too long, I won't be able to afford it. Is more often than not, is there a road or a path out?
More often than not, there is. Very rarely do you see circumstances where it's not reconcilable.
Right.
Very rarely. It does happen, and it does happen when you ignore the taxing authority, the state of Alabama or the IRS. It can get out of control and to a point where you just have to bankrupt it, like Joshua was talking about. Right. Most of the time, there is an avenue that you can take, some harder than others, to actually get something worked out and resolve the tax matter that you're dealing with.
What are some of the general misunderstandings of this area of the law? I would think it is people thinking, like David was mentioning, that their situation is hopeless, there's no way out. The reality is you guys are negotiating with the appropriate taxing authorities on a daily basis to try and reach installment agreements and other things for folks, are you not?
We are, and it's also the agent's job of the taxing authority to get it worked out with us. So it kind of works on both ends. So we try to get it to a number where our client's happy, and the IRS tries to get it to a point where their manager's happy. So
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we get back, I want to talk about whether or not the IRS can ever call you on the telephone, and if you have to field that call, or whether that's scam. Let's talk about that on the way back, because I think that's an important issue that we can address.
All right, we'll jump into that as soon as we come back. We're stepping aside for our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder, the firm of Hollis Wright on social media, Facebook as well as Twitter. Search the term Hollis Wright, find them, like them on Facebook. An interesting follow there. Also on Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into the Attorneys Talking Taxes tonight. We'd love to have you join the conversation. Call, text, email. Also a reminder, an attorney standing by right now to speak with you. Josh.
All right, so when we were going to break, I wanted to talk about the IRS phone calls, or whether or not that's a scam. Can the IRS taxing authorities, can they call you directly?
They are absolutely not allowed to call you directly.
So scam.
It's a scam.
And I've talked with you off air. I know that you have been through this before.
I got a call, last week on my cell phone, someone, the IRS, they said they are from the IRS. So, and I looked it up. I actually looked up the number, and it's a huge scam all over the place. But I also saw where some folks lost a lot of money due to that scam. So if you get a cell phone call or any sort of a call from the IRS, that's not legit.
It is not legit.
So it must be in writing?
They are not allowed to talk to you on the telephone. They will show up on your front doorstep, or they will contact you through certified mail.
Yeah, I think I'd rather talk to them on the phone than have them show up at my doorstep.
And they will show up on your front doorstep.
That's a fair point. All right, so once you do get a certified letter, though, and you have opened a line of communication up with the agent that may be assigned to your claim, then communications back and forth on the phone or something that you can do, or are they always communications in writing?
After you receive the letter and you contact the agent that's in charge of your case and your file, then yes, they're allowed to call you. But the initial contact is when no one's ever going to call and ask for money over the phone.
Right.
They're not going to ask you, they're not going to say that they're from the criminal division or that you owe student loans and that they're asking to pay that. All sorts of schemes going around that just aren't legit and just never take them.
Now, is there I've always heard of this concept, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, or the Taxpayer
Yes,
Rights?
the Taxpayer Bill of Rights.
All right, explain what that is.
It is really, it's kind of like the Bill of Rights under the Constitution of the United States, but it was enacted for taxing authorities, and it's just the way that they have to go about the certain steps and procedures that they have to do in order to protect the taxpayer under their constitutional right for taxing authorities.
And when do you recommend, if somebody has got an issue with the IRS or some taxing authority, whether it be the state or the federal government, when do you recommend, if they're going to get counsel involved like you, when would they get that person involved? Would it be when they receive the initial letter? Because it sounded to me earlier as if you were saying, look, don't put your head in the sand when you get a letter. Don't freak out. You know, there are people out there that will help you work your way through this. Do you recommend they get involved with a lawyer early, or do you think they assess it with the IRS agent first and then come to you? Just kind of getting your idea on that.
Well, it really depends on the situation that you're in, but I would always recommend contacting somebody that knows something if you don't know anything about the IRS or the State Department of Revenue. And absolutely do not stick your head in the sand. The longer you wait, they will put liens on you to get your attention, and nobody wants a lien put on them. That's about the worst thing that can happen to you, and they will start putting liens on you if you just ignore them.
And I was going to ask that question. What penalties are there if you just don't pay your taxes? I mean, there are criminal penalties, I'm assuming.
There are.
I mean, including potential jail time for failing to file a tax return?
Correct.
But if you file a tax return and the information is inaccurate or you don't properly pay your taxes, what is the general process that they use? I mean, do they write you a certified letter and then the next step is if you don't work with them, they'll put liens on your property? How's that work?
What they'll do is they'll send you out a preliminary assessment, is what they call it, and it's really a 30-day letter. And they give you 30 days to respond to their preliminary assessment. And if you don't respond by that 30 days, then it becomes a final assessment. And a final assessment is pretty much a judgment against you. And when you have a final assessment, the only way to get your money back is to pay in everything that the IRS or the State Department says you owe, and you have to sue them back to get the money back.
Is there an appeals process if you don't agree with what they've indicated in that 30-day process?
There is.
Okay.
And it's with the IRS, it's usually it's handled internally through the IRS, but they're advocates for the IRS and the taxpayer. It's just a separate appeals office that you deal with.
A couple of questions we've gotten. These are pretty closely related, so I'll just ask them both and have you guys deal with them. First of all, is about an extension. How difficult is it to get an extension? And also, what is the penalty for filing returns late?
Well, we'll start with the penalties. That's the biggest one. The failure to file penalties, 25% of all the taxes due that are owed. Then you have a 25% failure to pay. And so right off the bat, you're looking at 50% of what is ultimately owed. And then the IRS and sometimes the state will compound you at 0.5% daily. So add 0.5% to that every morning you wake up.
Yeah, it adds up.
It adds up really fast.
Yeah.
And that's why sticking your head in the sand is the worst thing to do.
And the extension, is it difficult to get an extension?
It's not, but you just have to make sure that you file your return on the extension date, and you don't get an extension for paying the money in, but you do get an extension for filing your return.
Right.
So if your assessment through your W-2 is, that you're going to still owe $5,000, when you file your extension, you're going to get your extension, but you still have a duty to pay on time.
Right.
So the best bet would be to file your extension with a payment.
Correct.
And then it will all true up at the end of the time when you actually file your ultimate taxes?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Headed to commercial break.
Yeah, let us step aside our final break of the evening. More of our conversation just ahead as we head to break. A reminder of how you can join our conversation. We'd love to have you do so. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Tyler Vale with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. In court, attorneys are not allowed to tell juries certain things. For example, we cannot talk about a defendant's net worth, meaning the defendant's ability, resources, or insurance to pay a verdict. In this week's Legal 411, we're answering the question, why can't lawyers talk about a defendant's net worth to a jury? Rule 403 of the Alabama Rules of Evidence states, although relevant, evidence may be excluded if its probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of the issues, or misleading the jury, or by considerations of undue delay, waste of time, or needless presentation of cumulative evidence. Long-standing Alabama cases have held that the net worth of a defendant falls under this catch-all rule. The reasoning behind the rule is that if a jury knows a defendant is wealthy, then the jury might award more money to the plaintiff. And this goes one step further. If an attorney makes any remarks that suggest the defendant is responsible because he is rich and the plaintiff is poor, that can be grounds for a new trial. If you're ever on a jury, the reality in our state is this. In almost every lawsuit that goes to trial, the attorneys representing both the plaintiff and the defendant have already looked at whether there is sufficient insurance coverage or assets to satisfy a verdict. The reality is this. The parties would not pursue a civil lawsuit if damages could not be paid after a jury returns a verdict. So even though lawyers cannot mention the net worth of a defendant during a trial, there could still be resources available to pay a verdict in court. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. This is our final segment, so just a few minutes remaining in the show. Also, just a few minutes remaining for you to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with an actual attorney standing by right now. Always get some really fascinating questions, so appreciate you taking advantage of that. And if you have not done so, please take advantage of that now. Just a few minutes remaining that those attorneys will be available and standing by.
I know an issue that comes up quite a bit in this area is business owners. If you own a business, can you be personally responsible for the business taxes owed as an individual?
Yes, you can be. It depends on the circumstances. Most of the time, people that have small businesses, private corporations, small LLCs, if they are actually the ones responsible for paying taxes and writing the checks, then yes, you are you can be held personally responsible for that. Usually it comes down to some nitty-gritty facts. Who writes the checks for creditors, who pays the bills, and those are the types of people that can be held liable as well as the owner of the business.
So you can't just hide behind the business cloak and say, well, you know, I'm not going to pay these taxes if they're owed.
Not with the IRS and the State Department.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
The IRS, they're fascinating to me in a very scary way. They're kind of like the boogeyman, you know. But you deal with the IRS all the time, all right? So, is this a reasonable group of people here? Do you think the IRS gets a bad rap?
I do think they get a bad rep.
Really?
I do. Procedurally, it's very difficult to deal with the IRS.
Right.
However, on the other side, the people that we have here in Birmingham working, all the agents that go out and they're just doing a job. They have a job to do just like everybody else has a job. And sometimes they have to be more stern with people than they would like to be, but usually it's not their fault.
Right.
But yes, I do think they get a bad rap, and if you deal with them, they'll deal with you.
Right. Yeah.
Talk about the spouse who has a jointly filed tax return. One of the spouses may not pay the taxes. Is that spouse still responsible for taxes if they file jointly? How does that work?
Well, what you're talking about is the innocent spouse. And when you file if you file a joint return with your spouse, then 100% of I say 100%. Nothing in the law is ever 100%, but most of the time, both spouses are going to be held liable. However, if you file separate, then there's a lot of gray area in when a spouse can be held liable for the tax liabilities to the IRS or the State Departments. There's certain factors that they look at. Did the innocent spouse benefit greatly from not paying taxes? Did the innocent spouse know that they weren't going to pay the taxes? Just certain little.
So that's almost kind of the two sides of the same coin. All right. So if I'm filing, if my spouse owes and they're not able to pay, you're saying that the other spouse is liable or is not liable?
They are liable if you file a joint return.
Okay.
However, a lot of people elect to file separate returns having filed married. You can file married but separate returns.
Right.
So if you do that, it's much easier to invoke the innocent spouse than it would be if you just had a joint filing of a return and you were held liable for it.
Okay. Another question. How difficult is it to get a tax lien removed?
It's very difficult.
And how would you go about doing that if you need to?
Usually you have to pay the debt completely off, and you have to petition the court to do so. Does that happen? Yes, it does. It can, and ultimately will happen if you pay your tax liability off. But the tax lien is a very heavy tool the IRS can use, and it's very powerful. And if they issue a lien, they rarely like to take them off. They will subordinate liens. If you wanted to, say, borrow money against your house to pay off your tax debt, sometimes you can get them to subordinate a lien, which would give you the option of borrowing money to pay off your full tax liability. But other than that, you really have to just pay your taxes.
What about audits? Are there statistics out there, or is it just random? How do audits work, and how long do you have to maintain your tax returns for fear that you could be audited?
Our general rule is to keep records for 10 years.
Okay.
Usually the IRS won't go back farther than 10 years, neither will the state. They like to see that you have records from that far back, just to make sure that there's nothing there you could have possibly been doing before that. But a general rule is just to keep your records for about 10 years.
I've always heard that the IRS can only audit 3 years. That's not entirely accurate, is it?
It's not. They usually only audit 3, just as a general internal rule with them. But if they see any wrongdoing or any criminal aspect or negligence, any of that sort of those legal terms that you and I know, yes, they can definitely. They'll go back as far as 6 years, and ultimately, if it's criminal, they'll go back as far as they want to.
And outline, if you will, if somebody's sitting at home tonight and they're assessing, how do I get myself out of this jam? I owe $7,000 to the IRS. I got to figure out how to structure that. What are some of the options that they have? I mean, I know you've got installment plans,
right?
But what are some of those options that someone can negotiate through you or through the IRS to try and make it go away?
The first that we usually try to work with is if it's a number that low, around $7,000, we usually try to work with what's called an offer in compromise. And an offer in compromise is you have to give them a financial statement, and they have a mathematical formula, and they just plug in the numbers and see if you qualify for an offer in compromise, which would reduce your tax liability greatly. If you don't qualify for an offer in compromise, then you go to an installment agreement, which you do over a 12-month period or a 24-month period. And there's also a little mathematical formula in that too. Usually you're going to pay it off. You can pay it off anywhere from 6 months to 3 years, usually.
You know, the only times that tax issues make headlines is whenever it's this massive, crazy, like a star. I don't want to name folks, but you know, these big stars who get in trouble and they have this gigantic tax bill. Is the issue there really that they have just ignored it for a number of years? Usually, is that really the cause of such a massive?
It can be.
Up there?
It can be. And we had a client not too long ago. He was an NFL player. He owed roughly $1 million in taxes, and it was just because he ignored the IRS. And it turns out we got the accountant to do the work on it, and he ended up paying about $2,500. And it's just because he never answered the IRS, and they didn't take his standard deductions out.
Jeez.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why putting your head in the sand is just the worst thing you can do.
Doesn't work. We're just about out of time. Believe it or not, we've flown by, just a couple of minutes remaining, but I want to give both of you the opportunity, just a final thought from you for our viewers tonight, just some instruction to leave them.
Well, I would just like to say that ignoring the IRS and the State Department of Revenue is just the worst possible thing you can do when dealing with all these procedures. It's different than every other court. It's just a different world. And when you start ignoring them, they'll bite at you.
Yeah.
And that's just the worst thing in the world. And I'd like to say that you can go to jail for not filing your return. It's a misdemeanor. So try to stay current on filing your returns and always tell the truth.
Yeah, you know, and what I would say is this is a very complicated area of the law, as we talked about and Sam mentioned earlier. You know, it is definitely not an area you want to try and work on your own. You want to do your best to try and get with an expert like Sam. If you are in this circumstance, if you have an issue, if you know that you need to work with the IRS or the taxing authority, I would highly recommend that you get in touch with us so that we can get you in touch with Sam, so at least you can have an evaluation done to determine what options that you've got. And so putting your head in the sand, as has been said over and over, is a bad idea. But you know, I think people in general are, that's something that is a common process, is they want to run away from.
It's intimidating.
That's something that's intimidating. Don't be intimidated. You've got people that can help you and can hold your hand through the process.
Yeah, all right. Interesting conversation. Appreciate the time for both of you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for joining us as well as we wrap things up for this evening. A reminder of how you can get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright. Those attorneys will be available for a few more minutes if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to get some free legal advice. Just pick up the phone and call them now. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.